there was an article, like there have been a couple articles coming out where people have been expressing, and I'm not talking about like people like fans or anything. I'm talking about people involved with production, like cast members, have been expressing doubt as to whether or not Section 31, the movie that's coming out this month, I think, uh, is going to be received well. I think Section 31 is going to be a fucking disaster from that trailer. Just Jesus Christ. What? That trailer is pure. I think what Section 31 is going to be is just this distillation of everything that people who were around in like not even the 60s, but like the 80s and 90s, for what the Star Trek franchise was at its peak. Everybody who was around then are basically just gonna like. It's just gonna be a microcosm of everything that we hate about modern Star Trek. And modern Star Trek, like, you might like Lower Decks, and it's fine if you do. Like, I don't begrudge you liking a show. You might even like Discovery, and I don't understand how, but I don't begrudge you that either. But objectively, I'll put it this way. After 7 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation, after 7 years of that production, the Star Trek franchise had enough sheer popularity and had pop culture awareness, popularity, success, and financial momentum to maintain 18 consecutive seasons of television, and it became a marketing juggernaut. A merchandise and mass market juggernaut. It became a licensing juggernaut. And in the 90s, Star Trek was unstoppable. Thanks to Star Trek The Next Generation. "30 years later, after 7 years, roughly, it really was closer to like almost a decade of producing Star Trek Discovery and its spin-offs, Strange New Worlds, Paramount is getting parted out, has been bought by Skydance, and is probably going to get parted out like a dead Toyota. Paramount is in such dire financial straits that nobody was even willing to buy Simon & Schuster off of it when they tried to liquidate their own assets. Because why would they bother spending the money that Paramount was asking for when they could wait for the company to go under and then buy it for pennies on the dollar? Compare, contrast. That's Star Trek in a nutshell right now. It is. That's what New Trek has done. There's talk. There is rumors that the merchandising for that 80s and 90s era Star Trek, the peak of Star Trek, and I mean that that's measurably the peak of Star Trek, is the 80s and 90s. That merchandise has fallen, the sales of that merchandise has fallen by roughly 90%, according to what is being said. That's devastating. Remember, J.J. Abrams wanted them to stop selling classic Star Trek merch when he was doing his Kelvin reboot stuff. And CBS looked at him and laughed. And that's why he went to Star Wars. Because the merchandise, the classic Trek merchandise printed money, and the Kelvin Trek stuff died on the shelf. Now, I don't know if the 90%, if the sales falling by 90%, I don't know how correct that is, but here's what I'll tell you, is there's a Walmart nearby. There's a super center. And for a laugh, whenever I go grocery shopping there, I would walk through the toy aisle to see if the Star Trek merch was moving. Now, I used to be a merchandiser. So this is a thing that I used to have to do for my job, is I would walk through a store, and even if I wasn't there merching, sometimes I just go to the store and look, right? Just look around to see what was moving. The Star Trek merch in that store, I'll just say I'm fairly certain that the only one who ever bought any of that was me. Because I saw the same toys sitting on the shelf for years. Year after year, every time I would go there, they'd be marked down again. They hung on clearance prices for like half a year. And the specific toys that I'm referring to are Khan, Kirk, Spock, the TOS Enterprise, and the TOS Phaser. Just for example. Kirk, Spock, and the TOS Enterprise aren't even moving anymore. That's damage. That's a damaged franchise. That's the damage that New Trek has done to the franchise. Like, I don't really understand how else, like, there's no two ways about that. There's no way. There's an Ollie's. One of these days, I'm gonna have to take a ride to the Ollie. It's far ass away. It's not a terrible drive, but it is a drive from where I am right now. One of these days, I'm gonna have to take a ride to that Ollie's and just take pictures to see how much. I know I'm gonna find a mountain of plastic Disney garbage there, but just take pictures of the mountain of unsold Star Trek stuff. Maybe even I can find one, because I know that the Walmart in question did everything possible to move this Trek stuff. They moved it to the clearance aisle. They moved it to like the bargain bin. Like, they moved it to seasonal. They tried everything to get this stuff to move, and it wouldn't. And that is the damage that Kurtzman has done under his stewardship of Star Trek. That is the damage that New Trek has done. That is the damage that occurs when a franchise has no vision for what it's supposed to be, and zero fidelity to the work that was done on it before. There's talk going around the internet, people talking about how Lower Decks has wiped out Discovery and its spin-offs from Star Trek canon. It's shoved it into an alternate universe, which, yes, it should have been done before. Is this true or is this not true? I don't know. I honestly don't know. It would that episode of Lower Decks would certainly seem to imply that it is true, that it is an alternate reality, because the anomaly in question that turns things into other things is explicitly interdimensional and not temporal. So, if something gets turned by this multiversal anomaly into something from Star Trek Discovery, that's because Star Trek Discovery is from another universe. Were I in charge of the Star Trek franchise, were I Skydance, clearing the slate of everything since 2005 would be the first thing that I did. The first thing. And you could argue me down from that. Maybe, you could argue me, to keep, Picard Season 3 or Lower Decks or Prodigy. You could argue me into that, right? But everything else, everything to do with Discovery, especially everything to do with the stupid burn from Discovery, gone. Out of there. That's an alternate brand within the franchise. That's an alternate universe brand. It'll be treated as such, and if someone wants to continue to produce content for it, they're free to. If someone wants to keep making Star Trek Discovery-related series in this alternate reality, just like the Kelvin movies. If you want to make a Kelvin movie, make a fucking Kelvin movie. but make sure that it's labeled Discovery or Kelvin. This is this reality in which this is set. This is this version of the brand in which this is set. This is not crossover with this version of the brand, which is the main brand. Keep it away. And as long as you do that, you can do whatever the fuck you want with it. Really. Marvel's done, both Marvel and DC have done that a number of times. Now, mind you, Marvel and DC nowadays aren't exactly a model you want to be following because Harley Quinn's Fartacular. I'm just gonna throw that one out there. Yes, that's a real thing that's coming out. Yes, it's the dumbest fucking thing you've ever heard. It's basically a bunch of people who are just putting their fetishes into a comic, and not even in the Grant Morrison I want Wonder Woman to tie me up way. But yeah, you want to make like Ultimate Star Trek? You want to make All-Star Star Trek? Okay, here you go. Here's your alternate brands. Or Absolute Star Trek. That's what I would do. And you could argue me into keeping like at least the third season of Picard. Not the first two. Throw them away. Take them away. I'm sorry, that whole season, those first two seasons are awful. Especially the second season. I thought the first season was soul-crushingly slow-paced and boring. That had nothing on season 2. You could cut out over half of season 2. You could cut out the majority of season 2. There was no reason for them to be 10 episodes long. In fact, I'm fairly certain both of those seasons had to have begun had to have been conceived of as a movie and then stretched out to 10 hours. There was no reason to do that. They're terrible. They're boring. Although there is the one highlight of season 2, besides the bits that were done by Terry Matalas. The one highlight of season 2 is Brent Spiner running over Patrick Stewart. That's it. That's it. I was almost fucking rolling on the floor after watching that. That's it. That was the only good thing. You could argue me into keeping Prodigy in Lower Decks in season 3 of Picard, and I think that is exactly what the intent is. Is that those 3 remain and everything else gets shunted off into an alternate reality. And look, if you like Discovery, you can keep liking Discovery. Discovery is its own thing now, if this is true. It's its own reality. So it hasn't been erased from the franchise. It still exists. It's still happening in its own universe. So keep enjoying Discovery. If you like Kelvin, Kelvin's supposedly still happening. So keep liking Kelvin. It's just not part of the main continuity. And that's because it never moved. It never moved the franchise at all. It never moved merch at all. And that was never profitable. It was never successful. I'll tell you this. I recently picked up a copy of the Star Trek Encyclopedia. I'm running... This is to supplement my my tabletop game that I'm running. I run Star Trek Adventures. I picked up a copy of the Star Trek Encyclopedia and the Star Trek Chronology because I am no longer going to be using Memory Alpha, because Memory Alpha is... It's like using Wikipedia for a book report at this point. It can be edited by anyone. It's edited every day to add stuff that contradicts other stuff from New Trek. And I'm not even from this point forward, if my players say something is true because Memory Alpha says it's true, I'm gonna basically refer to the encyclopedia and go, let me see, flip. No, it's not. I do realize that there is a new edition of the encyclopedia. The edition that I have is, I think it's the 1999 edition that I got, so it's missing stuff, which is fine. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine by me. I can pick and choose stuff from like Enterprise and stuff. That's all really all that it's missing. Uh, but there was a new edition released by Michael Okuda very recently that includes all the new Trek stuff. Not even. Don't even bring it up at my table. Like, we'll see, especially with, like I said, all the things going on with the franchise right now. Maybe in a couple of years when Michael Okuda or whoever is writing the encyclopedia writes a new edition based on whatever Skydance has decided, which I think they're deciding to cut their losses and get rid of Discovery. It's what I would do. It's the only real sane business decision to make. I'm not talking about franchise or creative decision. I'm talking about business. It's the only sane one to make. I want you to bear in mind, the average cost of an episode of Star Trek Discovery was about $8 to $10 million. Okay? That is Game of Thrones money. And that is what we know they spent. That's not even taking into account Season 2, which went grossly over budget and had extensive reshoots, as did Season 5, which was almost completely reshot. So Discovery is basically one of, if not the most expensive science fiction series ever filmed. And Paramount is in the gutter, being bought out. So it can be parted out, and we know it's going to be parted out because, what's her name? The current CEO. She was actually like part of the deal that she was trying to broker with Skydance is that Skydance would cover her legal costs because, as the CEO of the company taking a nosedive under her watch. Remember, CEOs can be held accountable by their investors. They have a fiduciary responsibility by their investors to make money, to be profitable. And Paramount has been doing so poorly that the CEO of Paramount, part of the deal with the Skydance merger, was that they would cover her legal costs because she knew the investors were going to come after her for all the money that she had burned for them, all the money that she had lost. And make no mistake, the investors, the shareholders on Paramount have lost their asses on everything Paramount's been doing for the last like 20 years. If you're looking at it at like from a business perspective, it's the only thing you can do. The only thing. So we'll see. Oh yeah, one more thing. I did mention that I bought the Chronology of Star Trek. This is actually really cool. The Chronology of Star Trek book, or the Star Trek Chronology, first of all, it includes updated, all new content from Star Trek First Contact, which should tell you how old this book is. But the cool part is that on the back of it is a price tag, is the price sticker from the Las Vegas experience. The Star Trek experience at Las Vegas. The copy that I have, I got it from like half price books. The copy that I have was originally sold at the Star Trek experience in Las Vegas. I think that's kind of cool. It's not just a book about Star Trek history. The book literally is Star Trek history. I think that I'm gonna track down a hard copy of, because I've been using my old CD-ROM for this, but I'm gonna track down a hard copy of the TNG technical manual as well. I have like an old CD-ROM from back in the day. You know, something that I don't have to open in DOSBox to use. And I think between the TNG Technical Manual, the Star Trek Star Charts by, I want to say Larry Nemesic wrote it. The Star Trek Encyclopedia, the 99 edition, and the Star Trek Chronology, between these 4 books, I'll basically have just about everything I need to cover all my bases as far as fact-checking goes in Star Trek. And I'll have all that I need as like a writer's aid, basically, while I'm like writing for my tabletop campaign. Not too interested in... Star Trek Adventures is set in 2371. That's the nominal time period that it's set in. That's where it starts, basically. Arguably. There's a TOS campaign in the Utopia Planitia book. No, not the Utopia Planitia, the Shackleton book. But the TOS campaign really is just a prologue to the TNG era campaign in 2371. That's the core of what the game was designed for, at least the first edition. So I think that's where I'm going to be, from here on, like, that's the era that my future games are going to be set. Yeah. And it's an alternate universe. Like, it's my own setting. It's my own homebrew TNG setting. It's an alternate universe. I can do whatever the hell I want with it. You know, it is my world. It is my Star Trek universe, my setting, and I guard it jealously. I've been yammering on long enough.